Among a pile of broken rubble, the old ape's ears moved slightly, heard a slight movement, grinned, bent down, picked up a broken tile, waited, got up and smashed it quickly. The tiles easily penetrated the walls and roof like a knife cutting tofu, and went away with the sound of wind and thunder. The tiles went to the place where the sound originated. It's a pity that the old ape didn't see the trace of the young man. His tiptoe was a little. His burly body rose from the ground, stepped on a pillar of an old house, jumped out of the roof hole, and landed on the ridge by the force of rebound. The old ape saw a boy with a wooden bow standing on a ridge in the distance, looking at the old ape in white solemnly. The old ape also knew that he had miscalculated. He just threw tiles. The movement was too loud that it was estimated that he had startled the snake, making the little mud leg of the mud bottle lane realize that it was bad dot. He had no intention to take advantage of the distance advantage of the bow and arrow. The old ape smiled and spread out his hands, indicating that he had nothing in his hands, then stretched out his finger and hooked it, indicating that the young man could continue to play fancy means. He was willing to accompany him to the end and continue to stretch his muscles and bones. If the old man is cheating, he really wronged the mountain protection ape of Jian Mountain. He has practiced for thousands of years and has 1,000 feet of real body. His body method means that it is not too much to praise him as indomitable. In the long years on the road of moving mountain apes to practice, especially in the early days of the establishment of the mountain sect in Jian Mountain, the weak mountain game made enemies on all sides, and tigers and wolves looked around after the founder of Jian Mountain died. As the #1 general, what kind of death and bloody battle did the old apes not experience? Today's small fight and small trouble on the roof of the alley is actually similar to the previous fighting that it did in those stirring wars. The top monks and great refiners also use magic weapons to contain the old apes from afar and then not fight head-on. Just like the big Kong light riding on the battlefield in the world, it will never be directly loaded with Dale's heavy armor soldiers, but cut the meat slowly with a fast knife, look for opportunities bit by bit, and slowly cut off the surface of the iron-bucket battle array. Now the old ape can be regarded as one of the most suppressed roles by the heaven here besides the Fan King Song Changjing, because of his special status. The strategist who hung the tiger amulet was favored by this heaven and earth. Therefore, although his cultivation was very good, the influence was not obvious. At this moment, in the face of a healthy young man who is different from ordinary people in a small town, the old ape found a trace of the pleasure of fighting with blood in those years. The old ape does not deny that the teenager has given himself a lot of surprises. He can calculate people's hearts, set traps, and give full play to the geographical advantages. Of course, the most important thing is that he is not timid. The old ape looked up at the sky. The west sun fell. Twilight had come, and his sight would be more and more affected. And he is completely unfamiliar with the geographical situation of the town. This is probably one of the strengths of the young man, that it can be regarded as an amulet. The old ape began to run like a galloping horse. Thought it was appalling that he could stride more than 10 feet in one step. At the moment when the old ape left, the boy turned and ran away, instead of going north along the ridge of the continuous lane. After all, there are Fulu Street and Peachleaf Lane. Big families gather together and hide dragons and crouching tigers. In case someone comes out for the old ape, Chen doesn't think he has the ability to escape from the encirclement and suppression. Therefore, Chen decisively fled to the west, because in the direction of the corridor bridge in the south, he had a wide field of vision and no place to hide. According to the comparison of their foot strength, Chen estimated that once he lost the obstacle shelter, it would be difficult to escape the pursuit of the mountain-moving ape. Out of the town to the west, there are deep mountains and forests with verdant vegetation. There are many sets of hunters on many secret paths. The mountain road is difficult to walk. If you don't follow the old road, it will be extremely difficult. Chen knows this better than anyone. The young man was right, but he misjudged the old ape. You should know that the old man, as the mountain-protecting ape of Jian Mountain, has a deeper understanding of mountains and rivers than the young man. When the boy jumped off the last roof and landed, he bent his knees, skillfully removed part of the falling force, quickly turned his head, glanced at the scene behind him, and continued to bow and rush forward. On the way of running, the wooden bow and arrow bag were missing. In the mountains and forests, once champion chooses to abandon the path trampled by generations and panic, they will inevitably become a burden. Seeing that the boy was about to launch into the water, the old ape was a little agitated and looked back at the direction of Li's house in Fulu Street. In fact, once entering the mountain, the old ape dare not say that he takes advantage of the land, but he is definitely more comfortable than running around with the little rabbit in the small town. The old ape made up his mind, quickly weighed the pros and cons, and took a deep breath of fresh air. If there is no big deviation, he can just kill. The old ape's face rippled with blue and purple, and his tall body rose up without warning. The poor house under his feet was trampled down by his foot. Fortunately, the poor people lived in the west of the town. The house was far thinner than the buildings on Fulu Street. For example, the wood used for roof beams and columns was not enough that there are for people in the house. Fortunately, they didn't stay in the house at this time. The old ape jumped up high and drew a huge arc in the air. When he landed, he was just on the side of the young man. His feet stood on his feet. There were two big pits, and the soft spring mud splashed everywhere that the old ape punched the boy in the back and hard. There are various young meridians on the back of people, so no matter the meridians and viscera, they are connected with the back, especially in the heart of the back. It is only a short distance from the heart, which is the most fragile. Life hangs on the line. Hearing what was happening next to him, the young man suddenly made an effort. He was 2 or 3 points faster than the one who lured the old ape to step on the rotten roof. This at least means that teenagers are always hiding their strength from beginning to end. This made the old ape's punch not only fail to penetrate the young man's back and heart, but also fail to break a heart. Instead, it just wiped an inch of the back under the young man's back vest that, although he didn't carry the punch, the boy was still hit by a big hammer, which made the whole man fly off his feet. That in the next scene, the young man's amazing strength and flexibility were expressed incisively and vividly. The straw sandal boy, with blood seeping from the corners of his mouth, was supposed to fall head to the ground after a punch. However, when the boy stretched out his hand and supported on the ground, his elbows bent first and then worked hard. The whole person turned over in the air at one go, turned into his feet falling to the ground, and continued to run and escape without slowing down by the inertia of moving forward. Even the well-informed and experienced mountain-moving ape will inevitably have some toothache when he sees the tenacity of the young people in the town. The old ape raised his hand. The blood on the back of his hand blurred. This injury is nothing. The old ape laughed it off. However, his determination to kill young people has become more and more firm. The reason for the injury is no complicator. That it's cold and chilly in spring. When a young man in a shabby alley with thin clothes appeared in front of the old ape today, he obviously had to wear a lot of their clothes. In addition to his own clothes, he also found the large old clothes of Liu Xianxia, a tall young man, which was put on the outermost side. There was another mystery between the two clothes that it turned out that the boy made himself a wooden porcelain armor. 6 long-cooked boards were drilled respectively and tied tightly with silk ropes. There were 3 pieces on the chest and 3 pieces on the back. The most important thing is that this humble wooden armor is inlaid with dense small pieces of porcelain. The old ape feels very bad at this time that it's like a dignitary. He accidentally stepped on a piece of stinky shit, and it's hard to get rid of it for a while. The old ape clenched his fists, held his breath, stood in place, first down, and the surging and majestic chan machine in his body turned over. His face turned purple and blue, and the ripples turned purple and gold, and flashed away. The old ape was furious that it turned out that at this moment, a stone came from the woods. The old ape reached out and held a particularly hard stone, the size of a fingernail. Then there was a sound that showed that the boy was running deep. The old ape's face was extremely gloomy, turned his head and looked at the night in the town. I'm afraid this is the other party's real plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain. But intuition told the old ape that it was best to shoot the straw sandal boy quickly in the mountain. The son and grandson Huai in Fulu Street had just been climbed by a young assassin before. At present, the highest branch that can bear a person's weight is much higher than the roof. There is another uninvited guest sitting down and standing alone. The sudden appearance of these two people made the Li families has tremble. So they had to hold their nose and pretend not to see, because the man in white robe sitting there was the governor. He took Xianxia to the descendants of Hawaii, saying he wanted to show him a good play. However, it was the end of dusk at that time that Xianxia didn't have enough eyesight. He could only listen to Song Changjing tell him about the ridiculous chase starting from the roof of Mud Bottle Lane. The man propped his knees with one hand and his cheeks with the other, looking into the distance that in the gap between telling the chase and killing process. Some unknown town secret or some arbitrary cultivation feelings will be interspersed from time to time. If we don't talk about opportunities, we can only talk about practical artifacts and magic weapons. The famous Sword Sutra, which has been rumored for a long time, can now rank among the top 3 in the town. If we lengthen the timeline and put it into the 3,000-year history of the whole town, it is estimated that the top 10 is a little suspended, but the top 20 must be no problem. Don't think the ranking is very low, in fact, it is very high. In addition, if the little guy surnamed Liu can digest these, in my opinion, his chance is no worse than the 5 of you. Xianxia didn't look up because a guy directly hung his feet on the boy's head. The boy asked curiously, then why was he killed by the old ape of Jian Mountain? Song Changjing said with an indifferent smile, I'm so lucky. I'm jealous and have no backers. That is difficult to understand. Xianxia looked puzzled and asked, why didn't you win more thoroughly when you were in the Mud Bottle Lane? The king of Dolly on the head of the young man laughed and was very happy. After laughing for a long time, he said, I'm very happy about those spiritual talents on the mountain. In short, when you go out and hear a nickname of the king, you will understand the reason. Song Changjing suddenly stood up and looked into the distance. His face changed slightly. He gently rubbed the jade belt around his waist with one hand and his eyes were hard. In the eyes of the martial arts master, who was almost on the peak on the top of the mountain, in the west of the town, with the bud rules of the mountain moving ape, the air machine was so excited in an instant that the breath of that area was chaotic, like broken porcelain. Song Changjing said slowly, you may wonder why those foreigners have eyes that look at others like mole hands. Do you really think it's just their natural conceit? Their eyes grow in the sky. Character is a small part of the reason, but it's more the general trend. You haven't been out of the town and don't know the transcendent position of these immortal masters in the outside world. Xianxia replied, I'm not surprised at all. It's hard to chat with people who have read books. Not surprised, Song Changjing continued, because there is a line between you and them. This line is bigger than a small ditch for some people that as long as you encounter it, you can cross it. For example, you, Liu Xianxia, and Jian, the book reader who is widely recognized by other Taoism, are all listed here. But it is not small. Most people in the town look at the line as if they are facing a river in natural mode. Even the desire to cross the pass cannot be borne. The gap between the two groups of people separated by that line is actually like people and plants are no different from the separation of yin and yang, or even greater. When he said this, the king of Dolly suddenly heard a sigh of surprise, and then gloated and smiled. The old beast was a bit unlucky this time. He got into such a little hedgehog and hit it deeply. Xianxia, I understand you a little now. It's hard for anyone to stand on such an opponent. That it's really a disgusting trouble except to kill him with a clean blow. Xianxia looked unhappy. Not far from the Li family's mansion, there was a loud cry, and the Ding Haishan needle in the dark angrily shot. The straw sandal boy really had a helping hand, and not ordinary people. Song Changjing smiled, even if the assassin's figure flashed under his grandson Huai. The Fan King didn't mean to stop that in the field of vision. The big figure of the old ape strides back from the west and constantly rises and falls in the town. It doesn't care whether it will collapse the house or damage the layout of other people's yard when it lands. The Jian old ape seems to have identified events. Song Changjing suddenly frowned, then relieved, and then the war spirit broke out in an instant. Song Changjing, Dolly Wu Fu, likes three things in his life: building Beijing Temple, killing talents, and fighting immortals. The next moment, Song Jigson stared. I didn't know when the man on his head had fallen on Fulu Street and collided with the burly old man running from afar. King Dolly, the old ape who moved the mountain. One person exchanged punches and hit each other in the chest. Xianxia took a step forward instead of retreating, while the old ape took a step backward. They hit each other again, this time on their foreheads and eyebrows. Xianxia strode forward. This time only he punched. Step forward. Step heavily on the ground. Squat slightly on both knees. Extend your left hand forward and withdraw with your right hand. The man was dressed in a snow-white robe, his big sleeves swaying, and his feet were covered with broken bluestones. Punch straight. The old ape had to stretch out a palm to block Xianxia's fist. Between heaven and earth, there seems to be two cracking sounds. The old ape slipped out more than 10 feet, and the shocking galley was plowed out of the green slate ground. Xianxia gently waved his sleeve, held the white jade belt around his waist with one hand, and said with a smile, "Che Jingchen, don't you come forward to stop it. Do you really want to break the jar? No. Hold on for a while." The old ape vomited a foul breath. Xianxia raised his palm, shook it, and said with a smile, "Wait until the king goes out. Now we are busy first." The old ape grinned. "Xianxia, you'd better beat me then. Otherwise the Dolly Southern Border Army will feel bad." Xianxia smiled and said, "As you wish." The old ape snorted coldly and entered the Li family house alone. The young lady was safe and sound, not even frightened. After learning the details, the old ape found that it was just a bad trick. After a little thought, he smiled grimly and rushed to the west of the town. Go hunting in the mountains. In the darkness of the night, Chen Ping'an continued to flee deeper into the mountain at a breakneck pace. A short while later, he rushed into a bamboo forest where the soil was particularly soft and loamy, and from there, he began to intentionally make his footsteps heavier. A few minutes later, right as he was about to leave the bamboo forest, he suddenly lashed onto a bamboo tree on his left, then swung himself toward another bamboo tree nearby. As he swung from tree to tree, he appeared even more monkey-like than the old ape from Sun-Scorched Mountain. And after repeating this process a few times, he finally drifted gently down onto the ground, then crashed down to wipe away the footprints on the ground. He turned back to find that he was around 50 to 60 feet away from the first bamboo tree that he had swung from, and only after that did he continue running. A few more minutes passed, and at this point, he could already hear the faint sound of flowing water in the creek up ahead. Not only did he not stop or slow down here, he leapt high up into the air instead, plunging into the creek before quickly rising to his feet. As it turned out, he had landed on a huge rock. He was extremely familiar with this area, and he opened his eyes up as wide as they would go, using his exceptional eyesight and memory to skip from rock to rock in the creek, fleeing toward the downstream direction. If he could continue down this path, then he would eventually reach the Azure Cow Ridge, which was situated to the south of the town. After that was the covered bridge, and after going beyond that, he would reach Master Ruan's forge. However, he didn't rush all the way to Azure Cow Ridge. Instead, he jumped out onto the shore to his right at a point where the creek had flowed out of the mountain and was sharply tapered to a narrow stream. It didn't take long before he heard a female voice call out to him, "Over here, Chen Ping'an." Chen Ping'an immediately crouched down, panting heavily as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Can we really trick that old ape onto the mountain like this?" Ning Yao asked in a low voice. "We'll see. I've done everything I can," Chen Ping'an replied with a wry smile. Ning Yao had come all the way from Fortune Street to meet him here, and she asked, "Did you get injured?" Chen Ping'an shook his head in response. It was just a minor injury. A series of mixed emotions welled up in Ning Yao's heart, and she grumbled, "Do you have a death wish? You're extremely lucky that old ape didn't kill you." Chen Ping'an smiled as he replied, "That old bastard already broke the rules once. If you had acted any later than you did, I would have been screwed." Ning Yao faltered slightly upon hearing this, then suddenly burst into laughter. "You actually managed to do it. That's incredible." Chen Ping'an chuckled in response. Ning Yao rolled her eyes. then asked, "What do we do next?" Chen Ping'an considered the question for a moment, then replied, "We'll stick to the general plan that we came up with before. But there are some details that need to be tweaked. That old ape is really strong." Ning Yao slapped Chen Ping'an on the back of his head as she chuckled. "Took you long enough to figure that one out." Chen Ping'an suddenly said, "Turn around, Ning Yao. Keep an eye on the creek while I apply some medicine to my back." Ning Yao did as she was told, turning to face the upstream direction of the creek. Chen Ping'an took off the robe that belonged to Liu Xianxia, then removed the suit of wood porcelain armor as well. After that, he pulled a porcelain vial from the young family's medicine shop out of a cloth pouch tied to his waist, then poured out a viscous ointment onto the palm of his right hand, with his left hand lifting up the hem of his shirt. He used his right hand to apply the ointment to his own back. Despite his high pain threshold, he was sweating profusely as he applied the ointment. Ning Yao had her back facing him this entire time, as she still asked, "Does it hurt?" "This is nothing," Chen Ping'an replied with a smile. Ning Yao rolled her eyes in response, seemingly dismayed by Chen Ping'an's effort to put on a strong front. Next to a house on the westernmost side of the town, the woman was sitting on the ground, bawling at the top of her lungs while vigorously smacking her own chest. Her thin and threadbare clothes looked as if they could burst open at any moment. Beside her stood a pair of dirty young children, looking at their mother with dazed expressions. At a complete loss for what to do, a man was also squatting outside the house, signed himself with a resigned expression. For some reason, a hole had been blown into the roof of their house. The spring chill still hadn't receded yet, and even though he was confident that he would be able to endure the cold, what was going to become of his wife and his children? Not far away, some neighbors of theirs were gathering together, discussing spiritedly among themselves. Some of them were saying that they heard a commotion on the rooftop, but they merely thought that this was the doing of stray cats and didn't pay much heed to it. There were also some who proclaimed that the western side of the town had been quite chaotic the entire day, with some children spotting an old white-robed deity drifting back and forth. Apparently, each stride of his was equivalent in length to around a dozen strides from the average person, and despite his enormous stature, he was able to run along the rooftops with ease. It was unclear whether he was a deity statue who had come to life and escaped his temple, or if he was a mountain god that had left the mountain for some reason. Elsewhere, a young soul cultivator from one lightning field was squatting by himself with a grim look on his face. Earlier, Liu Baiqiang had bing chatting with Kui Minghuang at the office of the Kill Supervision official, and after hearing about the commotion at the Li clan's manor, it didn't take long before he smelled the scent of blood in the air. However, despite his bold and brash personality, even he knew better than to directly challenge a mountain-moving ape on his own. However, he was keenly observing from the sidelines, trying to see if an opportunity would arise that would allow him to strike the old ape with a sneak attack. With that in mind, Liu Baiqiang had gotten onto the rooftop of a tall building, and from that vantage point, he scoured the town with his gaze, searching for the old ape. It didn't take long for him to discover the commotion ringing out in Clay Valley, and thus, he directed his attention to the unfolding chaos. Liu Baiqiang's bonded flying sword was being nurtured in his bright hole acupoint due to the injury that he had sustained, and in the instant that Bai Yuan had unleashed his aura to go after Chen Ping'an, the flying sword had been raring to go, almost flying out on its own. In this strange place, the degree to which one was restricted by the heavenly Tao was directly correlated to how advanced one's cultivation base was. Hence, Liu Baiqiang knew that this display of power from Bai Yuan had to have come at a cost. Even if he could forcibly activate his aura, then use his incredibly powerful physical constitution to suppress the turbulence triggered by the backlash from the heavenly Tao of this place, he definitely wouldn't have been able to do this on many occasions. Otherwise, he would have to bear the massive risk of the dam being completely overwhelmed. And if that were to happen, it was definitely a possibility that his entire cultivation base could be destroyed. Even if he didn't go that far, he was already taking a risk anyway by breaking the rules of the town right under the nose of a sage. However, after seeing the two massive craters that had been smashed into the ground by Bai Yuan's feet after he had launched himself from that rooftop, Liu Baiqiao was feeling very grateful for the fact that he hadn't rushed in recklessly. Otherwise, there was a very good chance that he would have diverted Bai Yuan's attention to himself. Only after sensing just how much power Bai Yuan had drawn upon did Liu Baiqiao realize just how serious Bai Yuan was about hunting down Chen Pingyan. If it were for the fact that he had to go back to the Li clan's manor to ensure that Daozi was safe, perhaps it wasn't a sure thing that he would have been able to capture the cunning and slippery Chen Pingyan. But he would have definitely been able to hunt down Liu Baiqiao had Liu Baiqiao decided to step in that of course. Bai Yuan wasn't an idiot. In the instant that Liu Baiqiao's bonded flying sword had almost flown out of its scabbard, Bai Yuan had to have definitely already detected his presence. However, even though there was a hint of lingering fear in Liu Baiqiao's heart, having just survived a close brush with death, he felt no fear toward Bai Yuan himself. If a pair of cultivators from Wind Lightning Field and Sunscorched Mountain decided to engage in battle, then that battle wouldn't end unless one or both of them were dead. Furthermore, even if there were one party with a clear cultivation-based disadvantage, there was no chance that they would beg for mercy from the more formidable opponent. This was a fact that was supported by the loss of countless lives from the two revered sword sects over the past 500 years. In addition, Liu Baiqiao had his own trump card in the town. Liu Baiqiao slowly stood up, but instead of returning directly to the office of the Kill Supervision official, he made his way over to the brick house on the westernmost side of the town. Standing outside the short earthen wall, he yelled out to grab everyone's attention, and after the bowling woman and his husband turned to look at him, he tossed a gold essence copper coin at the tearful woman as he smiled and said, "Please stop crying, woman. I'm getting goosebumps even from all the way over there." The woman caught the golden copper coin, upon which she discovered that it was very similar in appearance to a normal copper coin, except the color was different. She was a little dazed as she asked in a quiet voice, "Is this gold?" "No, but it's way more valuable than gold," Liu Baiqiao chuckled. The woman faltered slightly upon hearing this, then flew into a rage as she held the golden copper coin viciously back at Liu Baiqiao. She then rose to her feet, placing her hands on her hips as she yelled, "Piss off. I would have perhaps believed you if you told me that this is gold, but you're telling me it's even more valuable than gold. Who are you trying to fool? I'll have you know that I've touched silver with my own two hands in the past. You're just a scrawny little brat who probably hasn't even grown hair down there yet. How dare you try and trick me? My husband's still alive." The woman became even more enraged as she spoke, and she quickly strutted over to her husband, who was squatting on the ground in silence, before giving him a vicious kick. Her waist wasn't much thinner than a water tank, but she somehow still managed to make her look seductive as she twisted her hips from side to side while walking. Her husband was immediately kicked to the ground, and not only did he not retaliate, he didn't even dare to say anything as he scurried away like a scorned cat, then continued to squat on the spot with a sulky expression. The woman pointed straight at her husband as she launched into a ferocious tirade. "You useless piece of trash. How are you any different from a dead man? Whenever anything happens, all you do is stand around and pretend that you're dead. You do nothing all day aside from wandering around the town, catching fish and snakes like those kids who are still wearing open crotch pants. You're not even as useful as our son. At least he knows to pick up some useful things for the house. Why is it that you're unwilling to work at the young family's medicine shop? Are you filthy rich? Why would you refuse a paying job? How about you do something that contributes to this family for once?" The voluptuous woman paused here momentarily, then suddenly smiled as she continued, "If you're not decent in bed, I would have dumped you long ago." All of the neighbors who were watching the show immediately burst into raucous laughter upon hearing this, and some of the young men also began to whistle and direct dirty remarks at the woman. Finally, the woman turned her attention back to Liu Baiqiao, then roared, "Why are you still here? Isn't it time you ran back to your mother to be breastfed?" Liu Baiqiao had never seen an unrefined villager like this before, but not only was he not filled with disgust and disdain, he was very much amused. He had been treated to a good show, and instead of being enraged by the woman's scathing insults, he only became more amused. Whenever he had a war of words with anyone back of one lightning field, he would always be struck by a sense of loneliness, as he could never find a fitting opponent. Never did he think that he would encounter a worthy opponent in this place. With that in mind, he rose to the challenge, putting on a cheeky grin as he asked, "Can you help me with being breastfed?" The woman raised an eyebrow, then sneered, "I'm worried I might accidentally suffocate you to death. I suggest you go find Grandma on Apricot Blossom Alley. I guarantee you she have more than enough for you to drink." A chorus of raucous laughter instantly rang out. Liu Baiqiao had no idea who this Grandma was, but judging from the reaction of all of the bystanders, he knew that he had just been handed a crushing defeat. Liu Baiqiao gave the woman a thumbs up, graciously accepting his defeat. "You win this time." He then held up the gold essence copper coin between two of his fingers and asked, "You sure you don't want this?" The woman was clearly rather hesitant. Right at this moment, someone called out to Liu Baiqiao in the distance, "Baiqiao, Mr. Cui is asking you to go back right away." Liu Baiqiao turned to discover that it was Chen Songfeng who was calling out to him, and beside him stood a tall and slender woman with a rather cold and forbidding appearance. She wasn't carrying any weapons, nor was she particularly beautiful, but her figure was exceptional, and in particular, Liu Baiqiao was very much appreciative of her long legs. She was none other than Chen Songfeng's distant relative. As for exactly how they were related, Chen Songfeng had never offered an explanation, and the woman had also always referred to Chen Songfeng directly by name. On the way here, Liu Baiqiao never found the woman to be particularly arrogant, simply a little cold and unapproachable. Liu Baiqiao didn't dare to keep Kui Minghuang waiting, so he followed the two of them to Fortune Street. But right as he left, he reflexively took a glance at the sulky middle-aged man who was still squatting on the ground. There was a disheveled and unkempt man in the crowd, and after a brief moment of hesitation, he made his way toward the house alone after all of the neighbors had departed. The woman had no choice but to take her children to go back and live at her parental home. Everyone from her parental family was extremely snobbish, and they were always looking down on her for the man that she had chosen. So she really didn't want to go back. In fact, she rarely ever went back aside during festivals. But in the face of this unforeseen disaster, she simply had no choice. She wanted to take her children to live in a tavern for a few days, living the life of a rich wife for once, but she simply couldn't afford that lifestyle. She was so poor that she could barely make ends meet, so she had no alternative but to go back to her parental home. Even though she knew that she was going to be insulted, the more she thought about this, the angrier she became. And prior to her departure, she pinched onto a piece of flesh on her husband's waist before twisting it viciously, only letting go after his entire face was twisted in agony. The two children were already accustomed to seeing this, and not only were they not concerned by the fact that their parents were fighting, they were giggling to themselves as if they were watching a good show. Immediately thereafter, the woman spotted the disheveled man sneaking around the entrance of their home, and she yelled, "Are you here to steal more of my clothes? What the hell is wrong with you? What terrible deeds did I do in my previous life to have ended up becoming your sister-in-law? How could you do this to your family?" The disheveled man was so dismayed to hear this that he wanted to die, and he objected, "I swear to the heavens I didn't do that. Your son only made up that story because I forgot to buy him lollies. How could you believe him?" The boy merely looked on with an innocent expression, and the woman naturally believed her son more, so she immediately raised a hand to slap the disheveled man. The disheveled man hurriedly recoiled before scurrying away, yelling to the man who was squatting on the ground, saying something to her. "Senior brother." "That never works," the man replied in a silly tone. The disheveled man could only heave a forlorn sigh. "Good. Honest men like us are constantly getting screwed over." The woman made her way toward the yard gate, holding the hand of one of her children in each hand, and all of a sudden, she turned to the disheveled man with a seductive smile as she said, "Bring some more money next time, and I'll sell my clothes to you. I'll only charge you 50 copper coins per item. What do you say?" The disheveled man's eyes immediately lit up. but a timid look then appeared on his face as he negotiated. Isn't that a little steep? That's about as much as the shop on Apricot Blossom Alley charges for their clothes in brand new condition. The woman's expression instantly changed, and she launched into another scathing tirade. So you actually do want to buy my clothes? You deserve to be a single dog for life. Even if you die at the Eastern Gate someday, everyone's just going to leave you to rot. Following the departure of the woman and her children, the disheveled man hopped back to take a seat on the yard wall, then turned to the man squatting on the ground with a furious expression. I don't want to say this every time I see you, but I really can't understand for the life of me why you chose to marry such a feisty woman. As it turned out, the disheveled man was none other than the gatekeeper at the town's eastern gate. The woman's husband was still squatting on the ground, and he replied, I do what I want. After a brief moment of silence, the gatekeeper said, a master asked me to pass on a message to you. He said that you need to rein in your temper in the near future and refrain from fighting anyone. He then took a glance at the hole in the roof, and a smile suddenly appeared on his face as he continued. Master also said that if you really can't rein in your temper, then you can vent your frustrations on your wife. She's into that rough stuff anyway. The woman's husband raised his head to look at the gatekeeper, and the latter hurriedly said, all right. I'll admit that our master didn't say that. I just made that up. The man rose to his feet, and he was quite short in stature. He had a tan complexion, and the bulging muscles of his arms were stretching the fabric of his sleeves. He was also a little hunchbacked, and he turned to the gatekeeper as he grumbled, Jiang Dafeng, I'll take on your surname if our master is ever willing to say more than 20 words to you at a time. The gatekeeper counted the words of the message that their master had asked him to pass on, and sure enough, it was fewer than 20 words. He cursed the heavens upon making this discovery, following which a dejected look appeared on his face. It seemed that what the man had said to him was particularly hurtful, because it was the undeniable truth. Did master say anything else? The hunchbacked man asked. Jiang Dafeng replied, Master also said that you need to deal with that man. The hunchbacked man's brows furrowed slightly, and he habitually squatted down again, facing his broken house as he grumbled, Why should I? Jiang Dafeng rolled his eyes in response. In any case, that's an order from our master. You can choose to follow it or not. It doesn't matter to me. The hunchbacked man was silent for a moment, then said, Get out of here. If you try to steal my wife's clothes again, I'll snap all 3 of your legs. Jiang Dafeng immediately flared up with rage. Leah, you can't just go around slandering me like this. Who's been stealing your wife's clothes? How could you believe something like that? What the hell's wrong with you? The hunchbacked man turned to the furious gatekeeper, looking at him in silence with a dark expression. Jiang Dafeng was like an indignant little girl as he yelled in a furious and grief-stricken voice. Fine. I won't do it again. All right. He then rose to his feet and sprang up into the air, drifting onto the street like a lugger slave. Only after he had gotten far away did he dare to show his true colors. Lian, I'm going to your wife right now to buy her undergarments from her. As he was saying this, he was running away faster than the wind. However, the hunchbacked man displayed no intention of chasing him, and he merely scoffed. Idiot. The trio returned to the Kill Supervision official's office, and Kui Ming Huang was seated in the main hall, having already been waiting for them for some time. Upon meeting the unfamiliar woman, Kui Ming Huang rose to his feet and nodded to acknowledge, to which the woman also responded with a nod. But her expression remained as cold as ever dot in the words of Liu Baiqiao when talking about her behind her back. She looked as if everyone under the heavens owed her a large sum of silver. After the 3 of them had taken a seat, Kui Ming Huang turned to Liu Baiqiao with a smile as he said, It's a good thing you resisted the urge to strike Dot, otherwise you would have been in massive trouble. You didn't see what happened just now, but our Kill Supervision official, Master Song, just exchanged 3 punches with that mountain-moving able sun-scorched mountain on Fortune Street. From here onward, regardless of how exceptional an opportunity you come across, I suggest you don't give in to temptation and refrain from doing anything. A curious look appeared on Liu Baiqiao's face as he asked, Could it be that the old monkey took out Song Changjing with just 3 punches? Is Song Changjing the useless? Isn't everyone saying that he's already on the cusp of reaching the 10th tier? Kui Ming Huang heaved a resigned sigh as he replied, "We're currently living under Master Song's roof. Would it kill you to speak more politely about him?" It was Master Song who was able to gain the slight upper hand, Chen Songfeng said. Even though he was completely unrelated to Song Changjing, as a cultivator, Chen Songfeng still couldn't help but be struck by a sense of longing after hearing about such an incredible feat. It was astonishing to think that a pure martial artist could oppose a mountain-moving ape with nothing more than his physical body and come out on top from the clash. The woman was seated off to the side, resting with her eyes closed while her hands were placed on her lap, and her fingers twitched ever so slightly upon hearing this. She had originally planned to continue exploring the town, but Chen Songfeng had tracked her down and taken her to find Liu Baiqiao. Before the 3 of them returned to the Kill Supervision official's office together, even though she also had the Chen surname, she didn't care whether Chen Songfeng would be able to get anything from that old locust tree, or how many ancestral blessing locust leaves he would be able to obtain. However, when Chen Songfeng tracked her down, she was able to clearly sense that he was forcibly suppressing his excitement. So it was most likely the case that he had managed to obtain more locust leaves than the number that had been projected by the patriarch of the Chen clan in Dragontail County. Liu Baiqiao suddenly burst into raucous laughter as he said, "I'm glad that old bastard was knocked down a peg. I can't believe he was taken on a wild goose chase around half the town by an ordinary young boy. I can tell the joke in one lightning field for the next 10 years. Given how sensitive and uptight those sun-scorched mountain bastards are, they'll definitely jump out and proclaim that our wind lightning field is spinning a tall tale. If it isn't for the fact that breaking the rules of this town incurs far too heavy a cost, I would have definitely recorded everything in a recording treasure. So I have proof supporting the story." Kui Ming Huang's expression suddenly changed slightly as he called out in a stern voice, "Baiqiao." The woman's eyes also sprang open almost at the exact same moment. Liu Baiqiao was just about to ask a question, but he immediately shut his mouth. It didn't take long before Song Changjing arrived, and after making his way into the room, he turned to Liu Baiqiao with a smile as he asked, "What's so funny? Why don't you share it with me so I can have a good laugh as well?" Kui Ming Huang had already risen to his feet, vacating his chair to Song Changjing. However, Song Changjing merely shook his head with a smile, indicating to Kui Ming Huang that there was no need for such formalities. He then casually dragged over a chair and sat down right next to Liu Baiqiao, across from Chen Songfeng and the woman. Even though Liu Baiqiao had always given off a casual and lackadaisical demeanor, even he couldn't help but stiffen up in such close proximity to a martial artist who was very likely to reach the legendary 10th tier someday. In particular, this was a martial artist who was notorious for his hobby of slaying prodigies, and that only made Liu Baiqiao feel even more fearful and intimidated. Behind Song Changjing's back, Liu Baiqiao was always referring to him directly by name. But now that Song Changjing was actually here, Liu Baiqiao was feeling very uneasy. Thankfully, shamelessness had always come to Liu Baiqiao like second nature, and he put on a fawning smile as he said, "We were just talking about your epic battle against that old ape from Sun-Scorched Mountain. Master Song, that was truly a battle for the ages. When that would have shocked even the gods. The only thing that can match the incredible power of your fists is the kindness of your heart. If you hadn't held back, that old ape would already be lying dead on Fortune Street. Someone like me cannot even begin to compare with an unrivaled master of the martial arts like yourself."